Welcome. I'm excited to see so many people here. So today, like Jen said, I'm going to be talking kind of a little bit of everything, but mostly literacy focused. To give you guys some background, I work at St. Coletta, and my specialty is working with children that have complex communication disorders and figuring out AAC for them, so alternative augmentative communication. In the past couple of years, especially since I've started working with Becky and Jen at Connections Beyond Sight and Sound, I've also really started to shift my focus to literacy. A lot of my kids with complex needs, people just aren't teaching them literacy, and it's kind of fallen down or fallen off people's radars. So I've been trying to facilitate that, and I hope that you guys get some ideas from this presentation. So we're going to start with Storyboxes and language experience books, and then I'm going to head into some alphabet, sight word instruction ideas, some book modification ideas, and then talking about vocabulary and concepts. And I'll be available for questions at the end. So the presentation's an hour, but if you guys have questions, I'm happy to answer them. So the first thing to talk about are Storyboxes. So I recently posted a video for my school about Storyboxes, and they're basically a collection of items that correspond to items in a story. It's a nice way for young children with visual impairments to experience a story. So for instance, the one that I did for school this week, or last week, I guess, was we read If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. And this one's a really easy one to do because there's lots of salient or objects that we can pick throughout the book. So first he has his cookie, then he wants his glass of milk. I didn't put milk in here because knowing me, I will spill it all over the carpet. Once he gets his milk, he wants a straw. When he gets the straw, he needs a napkin, etc. So a nice thing to do would be to collect the different objects that you need that are mentioned throughout the book that you want your child to experience. And just like the name of it, story box, put them in a box, put them in a bag. And as you read the story, you could take the item out and let your child explore it. So it's important to think about some of the books, like If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, I think I came up with 15 objects. You don't need to do all 15 objects every single time you read the story, right? Maybe you're focusing on a handful of different ones. Maybe in a story, your child has a good attention span and you want to get through all of them. But you could do a little bit at a time. You really want to make sure you're providing wait time for your child so that they can explore those objects, right? It's a nice hands-on experience to develop language concepts. If there is a good activity, like a follow-up that you could do to help develop the concept even further, that would be really helpful. So for example, for If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, I had bought the Toll House break and bake cookies. And one thing you could do then is to go to your kitchen with your child and work on making cookies together, and then you get to eat your cookie after, and maybe you have a glass of milk with it. So just giving them a way to gather information from experience. So this was a big thought for me that as a speech therapist, I feel like I should have kind of got this. But as I've been working with Becky and Jen and reading some books on vision impairment, this has been a really helpful concept for me to think about. So our kids that have vision impairments don't necessarily have the same experience with vocabulary and words that sighted children do. So I think I take for granted that when we're reading a book and it's a funny story and the kid's laughing, I take for granted that they understand what's happening. But if they don't have experience with what's in the story, some of those concepts and that vocabulary is kind of going over their head, right? So one example I was thinking of, I have a few students that love Pete the Cat, and we've read Pete at the Beach a ton of times. And as I was putting this presentation together, I was thinking, I don't think that they've ever been to the beach. They're in a wheelchair. They have limited mobility. We live in DC. There's not really a beach nearby, but we read the story a lot. And now, are they getting what we're talking about as we read it? So thinking about putting a story box together or a language like experience kit together and getting to interact with all of the different items. So Pete plays in the sand. You can get, I looked all these items up, you can get sand for like $3 at Michael's or a pet store. You put the umbrella out on the beach. Pete finds a starfish. He goes in the water. I thought that might be like a cool experience, right? The ocean water is very different than the water that we interact with and that our children interact with all day. It's salty, maybe trying that. So just thinking about, especially, I know we talk a lot about helping them understand their familiar or their common objects, going over salient features so our children can recognize their like most common items. But for literacy, we're usually reading a really broad collection of books, right? And it talks about a lot of different experiences. And it's really important that we're developing those concepts for our children. I posted here, and I'll post the PowerPoint, just some ideas for story boxes. I am obsessed with Paths to Literacy, and I'm sure some of you are too. They have some great articles already about making a story box with step-by-step instructions. They have suggested story box lists. I also posted a link on Pinterest. Someone had put together an entire page of all different story boxes they found on Pinterest. I thought that was really nice. And like I said, so I have been recording like book readings for my blog, AAC Creatively, and that I've been sharing on the St. Coletta website. And the YouTube link here, the very first one, is for my story box for If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. And I'm going to be posting more of them. So if you want, you are welcome to be on the lookout for those. And I'm very cognizant that we're all trapped inside right now and social distancing, not really able to get out to stores. So I've been trying to do things with items that I literally am just finding around the house. So moving on to talk about language experience books. So these are a really nice way to use concrete materials that your child is experiencing and kind of put them into a book and be able to talk about this experience over and over again. So I don't know about you, but I love to take pictures whenever I'm on vacation or at a party or with friends. And I like to look back through my pictures, right, and remember things that I did, things that I really enjoyed. For some of our children with vision impairment, that might be something that's not necessarily accessible to them or meaningful to them. So a nice thing that you guys could do is come up with a book that includes some of the concrete objects that they're experiencing during that activity. The SLP in me, make sure that you're including text on every page, right? If it's a book, we really want to be promoting literacy. So whether that's print or Braille, making sure that there's text, right? There's not just pictures or objects. So some tips, it's really helpful if you include your child in making the book. So maybe you guys, before you're going on vacation or going to the store or going to the park, you decide that you want to make this language experience book, and keep that in mind. And then when you're at the park, maybe you guys grab a piece of tree bark because you've been playing by the trees, or you pull up some grass or flower, whatever it is that you're doing that you want to then be able to put into the book and write about. If they pick something, if you just decide to do some writing, your child can also just pick a topic, and maybe you go around the house and find items that go with that topic so you can attach them to the pages and write about them. You can use real objects, you could use partial objects. The big thing to think about here would be making sure it really is meaningful from the child's perspective, right? So if we went outside and it was a beautiful day and we really enjoyed it, I'm not going to necessarily put cotton balls on the page to represent the clouds and a crinkled yellow paper to represent the sun. That doesn't necessarily mean something to your child. So thinking about, we laid on the grass, so I'm going to get grass and put that on the page. Maybe it's in the fall and we liked jumping in the leaves, so I'm going to get some leaves. Maybe I put them right on the page, or maybe I put them in a little baggie and attach the baggie. Things to, like, just logistics, maybe think about using a 3-ring binder. The more objects that you put in the book, the thicker it's going to get. So you want to make sure that you have room. And then just thinking about like cardboard or some other sturdy material to attach the objects to. I don't know about you guys, but I know I have a ton of boxes right now. I just keep ordering stuff since I can't get to stores. So as you guys are ordering stuff, maybe just cutting out the cardboard and keeping that for your object books. Okay, so I wanted to jump into alphabet instruction. So like a year and a half ago, I read the Cortical Vision Impairment book by Dr. Roman. And one of the things that then when I went into practice that I was a little bit frustrated was the emphasis on sight word instruction, because I know as a speech therapist that phonics and phonemic awareness are really important to be able to ultimately read. Sight word instruction can kind of only take you so far. Typically you can't, it's very difficult to read past a third grade level if you only have sight words because you lack the skills to make sense of other novel words. I'm really excited. I just started reading the Advanced Principles book, and there is an entire chapter on literacy. And Dr. Roman talks about teaching letters and especially the importance of letter sound identification. So I'm working with a few of my students now on learning how to read, and they have CVI, and it's been really exciting to see them learning letter sounds and then being able to take the letter sounds and blend them into words. I do want to emphasize letter names, they are important, but for our children, what's most important is that they're learning the letter sound, right? Because the sound is what you use to blend new words. One of the things that I found with my students, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, when we started working on alphabet instruction is that she knew all of the letter names. So we worked on letter sounds and we got there. But then when we started looking at words, she did not have the concept of a word. So if I showed her the word big, she would go B-I-G. And she really couldn't understand that this was a word. We needed to sound it out and we needed to blend it. One thing that was really helpful was then using Dr. Roman's suggestion with the bubble words. I put the link here. If you just Google Roman bubble words, it's the first thing I think on Google is her website. You can type in any word and it will do that red bubble outline around it. It took about 5 weeks with my particular student, but once we started using this and really focusing on the shape of the word and that all of these letters were in one shape, she started to understand that these are words. It's not just letters anymore, and we need to read them as a whole. And I'm super excited. I saw her this morning and she read an entire 5-word sentence, either with sight words and with sounding out words. So that was really exciting to see that it's working. Sorry, I lost my place. So something to think about for alphabet instruction is doing at least 10 minutes a day. If you only have 10 minutes, great, but it is really important to start working on learning the alphabet. So that includes letter ID, it includes understanding the sounds, and it includes recognizing the letter in text, right? So not just when that letter is by itself, but recognizing when it's in a word or on a page that it is still the letter. And then you want to practice writing the letters. So whether that's with a writing utensil, a braille writer, slate and stylus, a keyboard, an alternative pencil, you want the child to have some opportunity to practice the writing as well. So I took this out of the Advanced Principles book and I found a pretty version of the quote online. It's important, right? Individuals with CVI should be taught the sounds made by letters of the alphabet, even if they're not able to independently identify each letter by name. It's more important for the individual with CVI to recognize that the letter B says B than to be able to name all 26 letters of the alphabet. Learning the sounds of letters is especially important for helping individuals with CVI recognize the beginning or ending sound of the word. Like I said, I'm super excited as I'm reading through the latest book by Dr. Roman. I'm really happy to see that she's talking a lot about believing in our students with visual impairments, especially CVI, being able to read and using some of the same approaches, but with modifications. So learning letters and learning letter sounds and then learning sight words, but we're just using some modifications to help them get there. One nice thing, and I think I have my board, would be to talk about the salient features of the letter. I'm going to throw out there, if anyone has this, maybe they could share it in the chat. So in the Advanced Principles book, Dr. Roman has a list of the 10 letters or 10 numbers, 0 to 9, with a description of the salient features that they would use. I keep seeing random individual letters either online or in her book where she does a salient feature description of the letter, but I've yet to come across the same as the numbers, that whole chart. And I think it would be really awesome. So if anyone has it or knows where I could find it, I would love that. But basically you want to also teach the letter as a shape, right? So this is the letter A. A is a short letter with a line that goes straight down and a circle at the bottom front. So, oh, I didn't bring over my plug, so I can't turn my light box on, sorry, but maybe I'm using my light box and we're talking about the letter A. I probably don't have these extra letters on here. I'm looking with my child or my student. And then maybe I'm giving them 2 letters. So I have M and A up here, and we're working on then finding the one that matches with our shape, right? So this A matches the shape. So we're looking at the actual features of the letter, matching them to our shape. I really like this activity. I've done this with several of my students that I work with, and it's been really helpful for them. So this was just an idea. If you guys don't have one, I found this little, it's called LED drawing tracing pad. I found it on Amazon for like $20. The only thing that stinks is that you have to have it plugged into a portable charger, but I love this and I use it for a lot of my literacy or just general instruction. So I just put that up here. And I don't know if you guys have done this before, but I just put in instructions. So I made these letters in PowerPoint, and it was way easier than I thought. I made the shape of the letter, and then there's this thing called glow writing or glow letters in PowerPoint. And after you write a letter, you can turn on this glow feature, and it does a nice highlight of it in the color that you pick. So I picked red. Okay, so working on alphabet and phonemic awareness. So maybe we're working on looking at the letter, identifying the letter sound. And then maybe we want to do some hands-on experience with the letter, right? So again, I know we're in quarantine. I found all these items around my house yesterday as I was getting this together. So I found a lot more for B than I found for A. I really struggled with A for some reason. But maybe you have a little bucket, and I have aluminum foil starts with A. My apple starts with A. I have my apron that starts with A. And I have my Apple Jacks that start with A. So maybe we have them in a bucket and I'm sitting with my child and we're gonna go through the bucket and explore the items, right? So we take out the apple, it's probably the easiest to manage. So I take out my apple and I'm giving it to the child. We can talk about the salient features of the apple. Maybe they even taste the apple. And we talk about apple starts with A, right? Maybe I'm showing them my A for apple. So you get to kind of work with the objects and pair that and the sound with the letter. After, like a next step, if they're getting good at that and they've kind of explored the objects multiple times, you could, in your bucket, so I have my A stuff in here, maybe I throw some other random things. So I also took out stuff for B, so I have my bone and a Band-Aid. So now maybe you're going through the bucket with your child and they're pulling things out, you're talking about them, exploring them, and deciding, does that start with A? If it does, maybe you're putting it in another bucket. If it doesn't, maybe putting it to the side. So I really like that as an idea to work on alphabet awareness. A tip would maybe be to try to use real objects and not representations of objects. Thanks, Jen, for posting the light box. So for instance, for B, my car, I had a little bus, but if your student or your child has no vision, or they struggle with understanding that this is a representation of the bus, there's tons of objects that we can grab around the house, right? Phone, Band-Aid, beads, bottle, baggie, book, that you can find that are the real object. And I would recommend using those. So I just put this in there. It's just a general suggestion, not necessarily only for vision impairment, but I think it's really helpful. So typically teachers have taught letter of the week, which if you do that, it's going to take 26 weeks to get through the whole alphabet. And we know that our children with disabilities tend to need more frequent instruction and more repetition. So if it takes 26 weeks before we come back to a letter, that's a really long time. So one suggestion, I've been reading this book, if no one's seen it, called Comprehensive Literacy for All. And they have really great suggestions for teaching students with significant disabilities to read and write, including vision impairments, being deaf blindness. And for alphabet instruction, one of the things they suggest is letter of the day. So they have 6 different instructional cycles for letter of the day. So for the first 26 days that you go through it, you would begin with, so the name of the book is Comprehensive Literacy for All, and it's by Dr. Karen Erickson and Dr. David Copenhaver. So maybe the first time you're going through the instructional cycle, you're picking letters that are important to your child, or if you're a teacher, letters that are important in your classroom. So like my name's Amanda, so I might, for me, start with A, M, N, and D, and kind of work my way through. Then after you get through those 26 days, you do alphabetic order, so A to Z. The next cycle would be starting with letters that represent the sounds in their names, then the letters that represent sounds not in their names, and then the ones that represent more than one sound. And I have like an example that I found in the book. Then you do the order of frequency in written English, starting from least frequent to most frequent, the order in which typically developing children learn to say the sound in English, and then based on visual features is that last cycle. What's nice about doing it this way is that, so like I said, the letters in my name are A, M, N, and D. If I got A, M, N, and D on the first cycle, I toss them in the second cycle. So you don't have to keep going with every single letter. As your child learns them, you can remove them from the cycle and continue to work on the ones that they need to keep working on. And yeah, I do have the Handwriting Without Tears book, and I did look at that for salient features of letters. I've been working with an IEP team, and we were just trying to put like a chart together that we can kind of use or reference more frequently, because I find that when we like individualize everything to every child as they move classrooms or switch teachers, we tend to like lose what the salient features were or how we were describing things.
Amanda, there was a question about what was the name of that book again that you showed.
Okay. Comprehensive Literacy for All. Sorry, I'm trying to follow along in the chat and answer as we.
That's what I'm here for.
Okay. So then another suggestion of things to work on related to literacy would be phonological and phonemic awareness. Honestly, we all probably do this all day. We just don't explicitly talk about it or teach it. So working on wordplay or rhymes, syllables and words, sounds and words, we can be clapping them, clapping the words in our sentences, which I just did that totally wrong, words in our sentences. I really liked an idea. I've been talking with a few of my colleagues recently about ways that we can incorporate more objects and hands-on experiences as we're working with rhymes and different word plays. And one of the things that I was thinking about is that we sing every day at our school. So having more object choices for our songs. So obviously we sing in our pre-K Old MacDonald. I can't bring in all of the animals for our kids to choose from, but having the different animals that they can can pick and talking about what they are and helping them to recognize cow and pig and dog. And then this way, oh, there's apparently rice in my horse. This way, as we're singing the song, they have an option to choose, especially a lot of our kids are nonverbal, and it helps them to be able to participate. Another thing that I was thinking of, kind of going back to those language experience books, and doing the story boxes, is that if there are songs that you guys sing a lot that you are able to help a child have experience with, then I think it would be helpful to go do that experience. So, for instance, I was thinking of Wheels on the Bus. I sing that in almost every early intervention session that I have. And some of my kids with vision impairment, they do like to sing along, but I wonder if they really understand the parts of the bus that we're talking about. And obviously, we're not going to go out to a bus and feel everything on the bus, but some of the actions in the song we could do with their car. Maybe going out to the car and practicing opening and closing the door, right? It goes open and shut. Touching the windshield wipers, maybe pouring water on them and seeing that we use the windshield wipers to get water off the car when it's raining, being able to honk the horn in the car. So just kind of thinking outside the box a little bit with things that you do every day. So I'm assuming that you're singing, if you have young children, if you're singing every day and you're singing these favorite songs, thinking about how can I incorporate an experience to help them really learn this concept.
Amanda, there was a question about in the chat box about zoo. What are your thoughts on zoophonics?
Sorry. I haven't. Oh, I think I was looking at zoo. Is that where it's like R is like a horse because it's shaped like the head of a horse? Am I thinking of the right thing?
Cynthia, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. Yeah.
Okay.
And like
so it's like you do. So like Dr. Jean has that A is for apple, and they pretend they're eating an apple. But this one is more like A is for alligator, and you teach the kids motions to do it. So like alligator, and then B was a bear, and he's grabbing the honey out of the tree. So it incorporates the movement along with the letter. So it's not necessarily that it looks like something, because like C is for cat. It's just the sounds that they start with.
I mean, it sounds like a lot of other phonics programs that use, right? Like I think Foundations does the same thing, just with pictures instead of motion. So I don't see like why you wouldn't. I do know that I've been to a lot of presentations recently by the authors of this book. So they're out of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and they are from the Center for Disability Literacy and Disability Studies. And they've cautioned a lot against always having one concrete object that goes with the letter, because then sometimes you start to associate that object, but you lose the concept of the letter. So I've been trying to avoid doing that personally. I do sometimes do that with some kids as like a alphabet book, maybe all of the kids in their classmate, whatever their first letter of their name is, I have a picture of them, and like A is for Amanda, J is for John. But I would suggest if you are doing something like that, then also doing, wherever I put my bucket, like also doing a lot of other objects and a lot of other explorations, so they don't associate one object or one action with that, and that kind of takes the meaning over.
Yeah, we did a couple. I know in my classroom we do like 3 songs, so that helps because they all have different things. Like one's apple, one's alligator, one's ant, and that helps. Yeah, I agree with you.
So the next thing that I wanted to kind of bring up was just access to print and literacy experiences. So I think for a lot of our children with disabilities, especially vision impairment, we don't always label everything or give them the same amount of access that their typical peers have. So this was just some carts that are in one of our classrooms at school for a child that has vision impairment, or he has CVI. So we made the carts black for him, and then we took an object that like represents the play kit that's in there, and all of these are also in the box itself that you could play with, and then using the bubble words feature, also just labeling it, so we could point out the text. This is for tea party. Oh, here's a cup. The cup is for tea party. We're going to take out the drawer and take out our stuff for a tea party and have it. So just as much as possible, labeling things. Same here. So thinking about, I have a student that uses an object schedule. So this is her object schedule for bathroom. We included the wipes as her tangible object. She always uses wipes when she's in the bathroom. But then I also included a picture symbol for bathroom because she has a communication device, and that's what the symbol for bathroom is on the high-tech communication device. Thinking about then maybe having the same board on the door of the bathroom, or having the bubble word bathroom on the door. So just providing her with as many experiences as possible to see the word, see the symbol. I just have here, this is her particular object schedule. I don't know if this is helpful for anyone, but I buy this like super value pack from Amazon of these like canvas panels. And I buy the 5x7 ones, and then we've just been painting them and attaching the objects with hot glue. And it's been working out really well so far, knock on wood, they haven't really come apart. So just wanted to share that. So another thing that you could do is provide words for our children. For one of my students, we took like an object that represented different books. For her, we ended up putting them on a Tech Talk, so an 8-cell device. So when she presses the object or grabs at the object, it activates the device and it says the name of the book out loud. All of them are removable, so you could teach them in isolation. We always look at the little Elmo on that black card, and then we read Elmo Loves Me. We always look at the button and touch the button, hand over the button. And then we read Pete the Cat, 4 groovy buttons. And as she gets familiar with the symbols, we start adding them to the Tech Talk. So now she has a field that she can choose from. You don't have to have one with voice output. That was just something we had extra ones, so we attached them. Okay, so getting into some book modifications. I enjoy modifying books, so it could include modifying the text, modifying the picture, or modifying the actual book. Thinking about always being purposeful about what you're modifying. So don't just modify to modify or modify everything for everyone. Really being purposeful about why you're doing it. So for instance, for text modifications, sometimes the vocabulary or the sentence structure is just not something that I think my child is going to easily comprehend, or I'm going to have to do a lot of explaining about it. What I've noticed I do is that I don't always read word for word, then I just like make up my own text on the fly. But now what I'm saying doesn't match the print. So if possible, replace the text in the book that you are reading so that it matches what you're saying, right? We want our kids to understand that words have meaning, and I'm reading the words. So this was just an example. So in this book about Steph Curry, it says, "But I was still small. When you think of a basketball player, you think of someone who's tall enough to reach the clouds, yet I was under the other players like an umbrella." It's a lot of simile metaphor. So I just kind of changed it a little bit, and I was still small as a repeated line throughout the book, so I don't want to move that. But maybe thinking of many basketball players are tall, but I was still small. I was shorter than most basketball players. So we can work on the concept of tall and short. It's a bit more concrete than I was under them like an umbrella. So just using that kind of concrete language, and maybe even being able to then also work on that after you're reading. I've also done some picture modifications. So in this, you can see I have the text typed in yellow and just taped down. Honestly, the student I'm using this with isn't looking at the text, but I want her to know there is text in the story, and I'm pointing to it as I'm reading it. We were working on turning pages in books and looking at pictures and lifting flaps. So for this, I had Little Blue Truck, and I just took black paint, and the teacher and I just painted every page, and we left like the salient object on the page. So usually it was Little Blue Truck. And then we wouldn't paint the flap. And so that was kind of an indication that there was a flap, and you could look under it and find what was there. Did I go right? And then another one we did was Pete the Cat, 4 groovy buttons. So I have found at Target and on Amazon, they have like giant blank books. This was in the Target dollar spot. I got 5 or 8 of them for $3. They sell board book ones on Amazon. So for some books, I have not used the actual book. We've taken a board book or a blank book, and then I will just use the pictures and maybe add like a tactile element. So for Pete the Cat 4 Groovy Buttons, we have Pete on every page. And on the page with the text, we always put one button to signal that one button fell off. And then on Pete, we had however many buttons were left. So it gave us a tactile experience to kind of keep counting them. And we had a bag of buttons as well that we kind of would play with as a manipulative and have more experience with it. Some other book modifications you could do are with the sound books. I had a student who really didn't use, he has fine motor difficulties, but he really wasn't using his hands at all to engage in books. And we added a texture to each of the different sound like symbols in the story. I was kind of hoping maybe he would even just like start touching them. It was really cool to see though that he would touch them and he'd kind of flip his hand back and forth. And over time, he started holding his hand on the sound. He knew that the same symbols were over there. And he didn't always get it right, but he was trying to find the same sound and press it. I tried to not do like random textures. So like the first one up there, it was the sound of rocks. So rocks kind of rough when they're going together could kind of sound like sandpaper scraping together. The horn, I had a really hard time with the horn, but I ended up taking like a stylus tip because when you press the horn, right, it depresses. So having the same kind of texture. If your child has difficulty turning the pages, you can add page fluffers. And then the other thing that I do for some books is just having representative objects. So for I Went Walking, we had little figurines of all of the animals in the story. And as you can see, I end up using them for a lot of things. So I still have mine from I Went Walking. I use them for that book. And then I also use them for Old MacDonald. Some of my students, we like to put them on the light box. They're not necessarily attending. Some of them are in phase 1. They're not really attending to the pictures in the story, but we're working on looking at the dinosaur on the light box, and then I'm reading the next page if that's not my dinosaur. Just some other ideas. My assistant and I have been making interactive displays that we just put outside of our office. And just has manipulatives, so you could retell the story with the manipulatives. We did like a snowman book, and she made a snowman, and we had different objects that you can kind of put on and rebuild the snowman. I saw at a daycare this Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and I thought it was kind of cool because you have the little, medium, and big objects, and little or small, medium, and large bear. I'm trying to figure out who goes on which, and retelling the story was a fun experience. Some other ideas are using environmental print books. So I had one, I love cereal. So I eat lots of different types of cereal. So I started cutting out my cereal boxes, and I just used packing tape, and then I packing taped them together, and I bound the book. So now I have something that's interesting to me. It's something that I see every day. I always see my cereal box as we're pouring the cereal into my bowl. And maybe you guys could do some writing together. So Amanda likes Cocoa Pebbles, and you're putting the text or the braille down here. Mom likes Captain Crunch. I don't like Cheerios. However you want to do it, but you can kind of make your own book, again, with just some materials around your house. I also like theme books. I'm gonna share, I wonder if I can share another PowerPoint with you guys. Hold on, sorry. So one of our teachers, they changed the theme every 2 weeks. And she tried to have activities, like play activities that went along with the theme, writing activities, reading activities. And at the end of the theme, she would put a book together for the classroom. Everyone got a copy sent home, and then they would add a copy to their classroom library. This is just the hard copy of it on PowerPoint, but maybe thinking about adding some textures or objects from experiences you did over that theme to the book would be a nice idea. So she documented, you know, as they went along, different parts of how they were engaged. So pretending and writing, making choices, and then like a nice piece at the end. So they all write a sentence about their theme, and then they all present their sentence about their theme. And then all of that goes in the classroom book. So a nice way, again, to just be a little bit more inclusive for visual impairment would be adding some objects or textures that went along with that experience. But those are really nice to have in the classroom library, and it's something that your child had experience with, so you can revisit it multiple times. And I'm just getting back to my PowerPoint. Okay. So at my school, I'm the assistive technology specialist, so I just wanted to include some other AT ideas for literacy. A parent of one of my favorite clients has suggested both of these things to me, and I have only seen him use them. I haven't had a chance to use them yet, but I'm excited to purchase them when we get back to school. So one of them is from the American Printing House, the Joy Player. They have little cartridges that you can slide in there, and then your child can press play, fast forward, rewind, etc. And the nice thing for the cartridges is they have a hole and you can attach something to them. So you could have books, songs, etc., and then have something that represents those, so your child could feel them and be able to use that object as a representation for what's on the little like cartridge that they put in. And then the other one is called a Tony box. They have a bunch of Tonys already for different stories. So they have little objects that represent a character in the story. And then there are audiobooks. So your child can find the book they want by object that represents it. So in this picture, there's a little Gruffalo. And then when you put the Gruffalo on top of the Tony box, the audiobook plays. So that's a really cool like new tool. And I believe that you can record your own books and your own songs on there as well. Another nice feature, the Kindle Fire has special features to help children read. So they have different books that are available that as they turn the page, the text highlights, it reads to you. It has the read aloud option. You can press things to have the text pop up as it goes. You can zoom over the text and zoom over images. So that's another like nice AT idea for literacy. There's Tar Heel Reader on the computer. That's where you can make books or read books that other people have read and published on there. They're usually fairly simple, so good for emergent readers. And then included, you could use a switch and a switch interface to hook up to your computer. The only picture I could find was this ancient computer that I haven't seen in at least over 10 years. But that's a nice thing too. Then your child can either press forward or go back in order to read the pages of a book. The Pictello app. And then I have used a step-by-step with levels for several students of mine. What we do with the step-by-step is you basically, every time you hold down the button, you could record a new phrase. And so it's really cool to then be able to record a book on there. So you would record one sentence, let go, hold it down, say the next sentence, let go. And then your child is able to read the story by just pressing the button every time the sentence stops. So the page is finished, they press it again, and the next page is read. At school, for some children that we were having a hard time engaging with books, we sent the step-by-step home, and their mom or their dad or grandma recorded the book. And then when we got back to school and we're showing them the story, they were really into turning the page, so hitting the step-by-step and then hearing a family member read the book to them. I also just included, I usually post them on my blog, but I've made books in PowerPoint that have like noise features in them, or that they're read aloud, and they can work with children who use eye gaze communication devices using Office 365. So for instance, in this book, Noisy Night, every time you click on the text, it reads it. And then in this one, there's lots of noise and singing. So then it also plays the sound that you would hear. Okay, and then last, I just wanted to talk about reinforcing concepts and vocabulary. So we know that receptive vocabulary is what helps our students to understand and make sense of what they're listening to. It's really important that our instruction is going beyond just matching words or pictures or learning rote definitions, right? We need to help our children understand the meaning of words by experiencing these things and helping them develop their concepts and ideas that way. So as you're reading, you might want to briefly explain new words as you come across them. Maybe after you read, you can give some more explicit vocabulary instruction, right? So in that Steph Curry book that I adapted before, we talked about how basketball players are usually tall, but he's short. Maybe after we do that, I have a hands-on activity with things that are tall and things that are short, and we kind of reinforce that concept. My favorite thing to do is repetition with variety. So reading something multiple times for different purposes. So maybe you read the book every day for 10 days, but every day that you're reading it, you do it for a different purpose. So if I had my object book kit, if I give a mouse a cookie, maybe on day one, we're not even reading the story, we're previewing the items. So I have my bucket with my cookie and my milk and my nail scissors and napkin and straw, and I'm letting my child go through the items. We're talking about them, we're developing the concept of them. Maybe on day 2 the story, and then on day 3 we're pairing some of the objects with the story. Maybe by the end we're talking about who's in the story or where the story took place. And then another helpful thing is making connections between the events or objects in the story with your child's own life. So if in the story a character and their parent are reading a book, pointing out, oh, we're doing the same thing. We're reading a book right now. Mouse and his mom are reading whatever book, and me and you are reading Mouse's blank. So that's another helpful thing to do. And then again, so really a big part of literacy is for our children with visual impairments is making sure they understand concepts and vocabulary, right? So that they could really understand the story. So just reinforcing vocabulary within routines, right? So maybe for breakfast and lunch and dinner, you're always bringing the food over to your child at the table. But then you're reading in stories, right? And characters are going in the fridge, they're going to a restaurant, they're going to fill the soda up at the machine, etc. Maybe your child doesn't have experience with that because they're not part of that routine. So thinking about once a day or several times a week, letting them participate in the whole routine from start to finish to kind of develop that concept. So at mealtime, having them come with you to take out a bowl and a spoon and going to the fridge and getting the food. If possible, maybe they're helping to pour it in, eating, and then helping clean up by bringing the dishes back to the sink. And then just some other ideas for a lot of my kids with vision impairment. For our kids without vision impairment and without physical disabilities, right, we're learning through play, and we're expecting our children to learn through play. And it's kind of unfortunate. I think a lot of the kids that I work with that have multiple disabilities, both physical and vision impairment, they're not getting the same sensory experiences and same learning through play that their typical peers are getting. So thinking about trying to use assistive technology to help that child play. So for instance, one of my students loves dolls, and all of her friends in class are always talking about getting their hair done. And I really wanted her to be able to participate and have that concept down. And so I took an adapted pour, and it has Velcro on it, and the doll's hair sticks to the Velcro. And then when my student uses a switch, it starts twisting the hair, and it's not exactly a braid, but it's pretty close. So she gets to participate in doing the doll's hair and talking about that experience. I use my pourer for like a million things. I love to attach food to it, and they can feed an animal. We put the teapot on it. They get to pour the tea in. I put sugar cubes in the cup, and then they pour the sugar cubes into the teacup. We cheers, etc. So I just had some ideas. Again, like I said, I have an AT blog that I share some of my inclusive play activities on. Another favorite, so I included it, was that for many of my students, they're unable to eat. They by mouth, they eat with a G-tube, and we were constantly doing play where we're feeding the babies with a spoon and a bottle, but that really had no meaning to my students because they don't eat with a spoon and a bottle. They get fed through their G-tube. So I bought a baby alive, and I carved a hole in him, and I put a Mickey button in, and we feed the baby with the G-tube. And he has diapers, so the water will come out eventually. And the kids love it, and they got to really experience what they got to play with something that they also experience, and it was meaningful to them. So I just put up my contact information in case anyone has questions or wants to contact me for any resources. But that's it. Sorry, that was a lot of information in an hour, and I talked fast, but I hope this was helpful to some people. Jen?
This was really great. And I think for everybody here to know the reason that the power of collaboration and why we work as a team and why we as professionals are consistently teaming and debating and reviewing all of this stuff, because we all bring different pieces of information to working with kids, especially with multiple disabilities and deaf blindness in specifically. So Amanda will tell you, her background is not deaf blindness. her background is speech and SLP. And so I bring to the piece that, your background is very much of using print and text when we're reading, and that's literacy. And we very much come on the deaf blind side, come from the perspective of we don't have to have text for it to be literacy, and all of the different ways that we provide literacy to our kids, even just with objects and pictures and all of these things that she showed today. So very, very cool, and great for people to take pieces of information, because we know all of this can also be applied to deaf and hard of hearing children. All of the, the phonemic stuff and the letters can be presented in sign language, can be done through finger spelling, all of that stuff. And so I am just going to add in the chat box, there is a video called Literacy for Us on YouTube, and it was created, let's see if I can put this in there. It was created by Dana Klein, who works with the Delaware Deafblind Project, and her sister Erin is actually on this webinar if she wants to talk about it at all. But it was created specifically just for deafblind children, and the different ways from families separate somehow. So if you're copying and pasting the link, it needs to be separated from the words Literacy for Us. I couldn't make that happen. But it's a great way of parents talking about what literacy means to them and their child with multiple disabilities. So just another resource for everybody to look at. But this was amazing. If anybody has any questions, I am also, in the last few minutes before everybody leaves, I'm going to put up a poll, because we have to do evaluations for our project. And Amanda, I think there are some questions in the chat box if you wanted to look at that.
So after this presentation, I'm going to take my PowerPoint and I'm going to post it on my blog. On the page that's up right now, AAC Creatively is the name of my blog. So it'll be at aaccreatively.com. And I'll have that posted by tonight. I don't know, Jen, if you want to post it somewhere or if that's good enough. And then I don't know, Jen, if you want to answer the question about the recording of it.
Oh.